what do you think? Does the DJI Action 6 produce cinematic enough results when shooting with the built-in film tone presets without color grading? I think it does. I'm actually pretty surprised by the results. They're not significantly worse than using the enhancer in post-production, which costs around $700. So if you are on a budget or want to save editing time, the built-in film tone presets on the Action 6 are definitely something worth considering. But now let me share with you my favorite settings when using these presets and also which one is my favorite. Starting with manual settings, I set the resolution and frame rate to 4K 25p. I don't really use 8K as it doesn't produce significantly better results than 4K. I always set the white balance manually depending on the lighting. Set the aperture to f4 to get the sharpest image possible. Keep the ISO at 100 to reduce noise as much as possible. Set texture and noise reduction to -2 to minimize the digital look. Set the shutter to 1/100 to keep some motion blur and maintain good stabilization performance. And then expose using my Freewheel ND filters until the image looks good on the display with the EV meter hovering around -0.7 to -1 EV. Honestly, if it looks good to me on the screen when previewing the shot, this usually means it's going to look also good on the computer in post-production because the screen on the Action 6 is very accurate when it comes to judging the exposure and white balance. But I would set the brightness of the screen to 100% just to make it a bit easier to properly judge exposure and white balance. Now, when it comes to automatic settings for vlogging scenarios like right now, I set the white balance to automatic to get proper colors in any shooting situation. The aperture to automatic as well, ranging from f2 to f4 to let more light hit the sensor in darker conditions. The ISO ranging from 100 to 800 to keep noise as minimal as possible. The shutter from 1/100 to 1/8000, again to retain good stabilization performance. And finally, the EV to -1 to preserve highlights as much as possible because by default the Action 6 tends to expose the image brighter than necessary. However, if you're shooting in somewhat darker conditions or cloudy conditions like I'm shooting in right now, I would max the ISO to 1600 and reduce the EV compensation to -0.7, which is actually what I'm using right now. But for the most part, if it is really bright outside, I would set the maximum ISO to 800 and then set the EV compensation to -1 to get the cleanest image possible from this camera without really doing anything in post-production. Now, when it comes to the film tone presets, my favorites are CC, NC, TR, and WT. I didn't really like the FE and NV presets because they look a bit more off to me than the others. But regardless, if I want cooler tones in my shot, I choose either the CC or NC presets. And if I want warmer tones, I choose either the TR or WT presets. From my tests, the CC preset has a classic contrasty bleach bypass look, which works really well if you want a muted image. The NC preset has a lot of teal tones in the shadows for a more moody, cold look. The TR preset has a warmer, vintage, neutral magenta look. And finally, the WT preset has a very warm, saturated look with significantly more color density than the other presets. Also, I never really use these presets at 100% intensity. I usually set them somewhere between 50% and 70% to get a subtle look while still keeping the image somewhat neutral. Otherwise, at 100% intensity, it can be a bit too much. But of course, this comes down to personal preference. I would recommend doing some tests to see which preset works the best for you and also what intensity you should set the preset to get the best results possible with your Action 6 footage. But overall, if you don't want to tinker with color grading in post-production and want to get good results quickly, definitely consider using the film tone presets on the Action 6. I think they look fantastic. And in a way, I'm questioning whether I even need to do color grading when shooting with this camera because the results are pretty awesome. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hopefully you got some valuable information today. Let me know down below what you think about these presets. And I guess I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.